Laura sat at her kitchen table, a mug of lukewarm coffee in front of her, the steam long since faded. The house was quiet, unusually so for her birthday. She glanced at the calendar hanging on the wall. Today was the day. Her 50th birthday. A milestone. A moment she had spent years preparing for. But it wasn't the milestone itself that excited her. It was the gift she had been saving for, planning for so long. For the past 2 decades, Laura had worked tirelessly. She was a single mother, raising 2 children on her own after her marriage fell apart. The financial struggle had been real, but her love for her children had always kept her going. She worked extra shifts at the hospital, picked up odd jobs, when she could, and did everything within her power to give her kids the best life possible. But despite the struggle, she managed to do something extraordinary. She saved. She hadn't told her children, not directly. They had no idea what she was up to. Over the years, she set aside a little each paycheck, each bonus, every financial windfall. She kept it secret, tucked away in a high-interest account, until one day when they were older, she would give them something that would change their lives. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the future she had worked so hard to build for them. Her son, Matt, was 25 now, and her daughter, Sophie, was 22. She had always dreamed of giving them this gift when they reached the point in their lives where they could use it most, whether it was for their education, starting a family, buying a house, or chasing their dreams. They wouldn't have to struggle the way she did. She had made sure of that. The $1 million was more than just an inheritance. It was a testament to her love, her sacrifice, and her unwavering belief in their potential. Laura had thought about this moment for years, fantasizing about how it would unfold. She imagined their reactions, smiles, hugs, maybe even tears. Her children would realize how much she had done for them, how much she had saved, and in that moment, their bond would grow stronger than ever. As the clock ticked toward evening, Laura couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. It was time. She had already set up the family dinner, everything prepared to perfection. She had even gone the extra mile, ordered their favorite foods, ensured the house was beautifully decorated, and bought a cake with candles. She couldn't wait to see their faces when she handed them the key to their futures. But as she finished, setting the table, a strange feeling began to settle in her chest. It was a subtle discomfort, a knot in her stomach, but she couldn't shake it. Her children had been distant recently. Matt had been busy with his new job. Sophie was always out with friends, and whenever she tried to call them, they seemed to brush her off. She had attributed it to their busy lives. After all, they were adults now. But tonight, her phone remained silent. Her heart raced as she checked her phone, hoping to see a message or a missed call. There was nothing, not even a simple birthday greeting. The seconds stretched into minutes, and still, no word. It was already past 7 p.m. and the dinner had been set for 8. Was it possible they had forgotten? She shook her head, refusing to believe it. This had to be a misunderstanding. They wouldn't just leave her like this. Finally, she called Matt. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Still nothing. She sent him a quick text. "Hi, honey. I'm waiting for you at home. Dinner's ready. Please come soon." She stared at her phone, waiting for a response. There was none. A few minutes later, she tried calling Sophie. The same outcome. No answer. Her heart sank. It wasn't like them to forget. She tried to ignore the growing unease, telling herself they were probably running late, maybe caught up in something. She had to believe that. She set the table, but the plates and glasses felt cold in her hands. Her excitement, once so palpable, was fading with every passing minute. She looked at the clock again. 8:15. It was unlike them to be this late without at least texting. But there was nothing. Her mind began to race. What was going on? Had something happened? Were they stuck in traffic? Did they forget? She called Matt again. This time it went straight to voicemail. "I'm sorry, but the person you're trying to reach is unavailable." A lump formed in her throat. It wasn't until 9:30 p.m. that Laura heard from Sophie. The text message that appeared on her phone was short, almost clinical. "Happy birthday, Mom. Hope it was a good one." That was it. No mention of dinner. No mention of the gift she had prepared. Just that. Laura's hand trembled as she set her phone down. She could feel the sting of betrayal piercing her heart. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This was supposed to be a celebration, a moment of joy, of togetherness. Instead, it felt like she was invisible. In the quiet of the house, surrounded by the remnants of a celebration that would never be, Laura sat down, staring at the untouched gift. The $1 million that was meant to change their lives. And as the silence in the room grew deeper, she realized something she hadn't wanted to admit before. Her children might never understand what she had done for them. They might never see the sacrifice, the love, the years of hard work that went into this gift. And that thought, more than anything else, hurt the most. Laura spent the next few days in a haze. Her birthday had come and gone, leaving behind a sense of emptiness that was almost unbearable. The house that had once been filled with the laughter and warmth of her children now felt cold and silent. The $1 million check she had saved for them, the gift that had been years in the making, sat on her kitchen counter, untouched and unread. She couldn't bring herself to even look at it, knowing it would only remind her of the gap that had slowly crept between her and the people she loved most. She hadn't heard from Matt or Sophie since that one brief text from Sophie. Despite the growing knot in her stomach, Laura tried to convince herself that they were just busy. They were adults now, after all, living their own lives. She had to let go, she told herself. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. A week passed before she heard from Matt. It wasn't a phone call, but a message, another text, this time from him. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw his name flash across her screen, but the words that followed made her blood run cold. "Mom, we need to talk. Sophie and I are at Maria's this weekend. We'll be in touch later. Maria." The name echoed in Laura's mind like an alarm bell. Maria was the woman her ex-husband had married after their divorce. The same woman who had been the catalyst for the unraveling of their family. The woman who had always seemed to have a different agenda when it came to Laura's children. The text was brief, too brief. Laura felt a stab of anger mixed with confusion. Maria? This woman? She had always felt a sense of distance from Maria, even before the divorce. The way she'd looked at Laura, as if she were a complication in the picture, a ghost haunting their happy family. It had always been clear that Maria didn't approve of Laura's place in her children's lives. Laura tried calling Matt, desperate for some kind of answer, but the call went straight to voicemail. She tried again, then again. Nothing. The silence was deafening. Her children, who she had dedicated her life to, were now spending their time with a woman who had no part in their bloodline, no part in their shared history. It was as though they had simply forgotten her. Had Maria poisoned their minds against her? Was this what her life had become? The distance between them had always been there, but now it felt as though the chasm was growing wider by the day. The next morning, Laura could no longer sit idly by. She needed to know what was happening, and she needed to know now. She picked up the phone again, this time dialing Sophie's number. It rang and rang, but no answer. Her frustration began to boil over. What were they doing? Was this some kind of sick joke? How could they do this to her? Then, finally, after days of silence, she received a call from Sophie. Her daughter's voice, once so full of love and laughter, now sounded cold and distant. "Mom, I'm sorry I haven't been in touch. We've just been busy with Maria's family. We're all here for the weekend, celebrating things." Laura's heart dropped at the word celebrating. It felt as though the words had been chosen carefully, as if Sophie was trying to distance herself from Laura as much as possible. "Celebrating what, Sophie?" Laura asked, trying to keep the trembling in her voice under control. "Celebrating what exactly? Your family? Your new family?" Sophie didn't answer right away. When she did speak, her words stung more than any sharp remark. "It's just, we've made some decisions. Maria is really great, Mom. You don't understand. She's been there for us. Really supportive." Laura felt her chest tighten as her daughter's words echoed in her mind. Maria had been there for them? What did that mean for her? What did it mean for the years of sacrifice, the countless sleepless nights, the meals she skipped to make sure they had everything they needed? Was it all worth nothing? Did her children forget all of it so easily? "Why didn't you even come to my birthday, Sophie?" Laura choked out, her voice barely a whisper now. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Sophie finally responded, her voice laced with regret, but not enough to change the situation. I didn't think it was necessary." "Mom, you're fine, right? You've got everything under control. I thought it was best we just focus on what's in front of us. Things are changing, and we need to adjust." Laura hung up the phone, her heart heavy with the weight of betrayal. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. Sophie, her daughter, the one she had raised, had chosen to prioritize her stepmother, this woman, over the very person who had given her everything. In that moment, Laura's dreams of a perfect family fell apart. The $1 million she had saved for them no longer seemed important. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about love and trust, and that was something that had been shattered in an instant. As she sat alone at the table, the weight of the silence around her was deafening. The house that once held so much joy now felt suffocating, and the only thing Laura could do was wait. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know if they would ever return. But one thing was clear. Everything had changed. The days that followed Sophie's cold, distant conversation felt like an eternity to Laura. Each moment in the house seemed to drag on, suffocating her with its silence. The $1 million check, once a symbol of hope and love, now felt like a cruel reminder of the distance between her and her children. Every time she walked past it, she felt a deep sense of emptiness settle within her. She had no idea what had happened. One day, they had been her children, the ones she fought for, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally. The next, they were strangers who had turned their backs on her without a second thought. It wasn't just the phone calls that had gone unanswered or the texts that came with no warmth. It was the realization that they had made a choice. A choice to be with Maria, the woman who had come into their lives after the divorce and seemed to slowly replace her. Laura didn't blame Maria entirely. After all, she was married to her ex-husband. But the weight of that woman's presence in their lives was more than Laura could bear. And now, to hear Sophie speak of her so fondly, to hear Matt echo those sentiments, it was like a knife to the heart. It was clear that something was changing, something she couldn't control. Laura knew it wasn't just a phase. Her children weren't just adjusting to a new stepmother. They were rejecting their past, rejecting the very foundation of their family that she had worked so hard to create. And that hurt more than anything else. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the trees outside, Laura's phone rang. It was Matt. For a moment, she debated whether to answer it at all. She wasn't sure she was ready for another heart-wrenching conversation, but the thought of being left in the dark was even worse. So, with trembling hands, she picked up the phone. "Mom?" Matt's voice was tentative, unsure, as though he wasn't quite sure how to begin. "Can we talk?" Laura's heart pounded in her chest. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself before responding. "Of course, Matt. What's going on? Why haven't you been in touch?" I didn't know how to tell you," he said, his voice distant. "Things have changed. Sophie and we've decided to stay with Maria and her family for a while. It's just easier, you know?" "Easier?" Laura repeated, the word hanging in the air like a weight. "Easier for who, Matt? You and Sophie? Or for her?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mom, it's not like that. Maria has really been there for us, especially after everything that happened with the divorce. We need her right now." Laura's chest tightened. She didn't want to hear this. She didn't want to hear how Maria had become a substitute for the mother they had always known. She didn't want to hear that her children had replaced her with someone who had never experienced the sacrifices she had made for them. "I've always been here for you, Matt," Laura said quietly, her voice breaking. "I've always given everything I had to make sure you both were okay. And now you're telling me that Maria is who you need?" "We didn't mean for it to happen like this," he replied, his voice filled with an awkwardness that was almost painful. "But it's how things are now, Mom. I hope you can understand." Laura felt the sting of betrayal deepen. Understand? How could she understand that the children she had dedicated her life to had made the conscious choice to abandon her for the very person who had torn their family apart? The woman who had torn apart her marriage and had now seemingly taken her place in their hearts. She had spent so many years envisioning a future where her children would come to her for advice, would turn to her for guidance, and would appreciate the love she had given them. And now, it seemed that all of it had been in vain. Maria had filled the void she had once occupied, and in doing so, erased her presence from their lives. The idea of it was so unbearable that Laura struggled to breathe. "I don't know what to say, Matt." Laura whispered. I thought we had something special, something that nothing could break. But it seems like I was wrong. Mom, please don't say that, Matt pleaded. We're still your kids. We just need time to figure things out. This isn't the end, isn't it? Laura whispered back, feeling as though she was drowning in the sea of emotions that overwhelmed her. It sure feels like the end. The conversation ended with an awkward silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air between them. Laura stood in the kitchen, feeling like a stranger in her own life. Her children, the ones she had fought so hard for, had made a choice, and that choice had left her on the outside looking in. The $1 million check that had once been a symbol of love and hope now felt like a distant memory. It wasn't just the money she had given them. It was the years of her life, the sacrifices, the love. All of it reduced to nothing. And in that moment, Laura realized that she might never get back the children she once knew. The ones who had once relied on her. The ones who had once called her Mom. Everything had changed. The silence that had followed the painful conversation with Matt left Laura feeling more isolated than ever. It was as if her entire world had collapsed on itself, leaving her in a place where she didn't know how to move forward. She spent her days in a haze, drifting from room to room, unable to focus on anything for long. The house felt like a shell, a cold, empty place that once held so much warmth and joy. It was now tainted by the betrayal she felt deep in her bones. The days passed. The weight of the situation began to press harder on Laura's chest. She couldn't let this go. She couldn't just sit idly by while her children turned their backs on her. If she didn't confront the truth, if she didn't get some kind of answer, she knew she would never find peace. Her children had made their choices. But there was more to this than she understood. Why had they suddenly distanced themselves? Why had they chosen Maria over her? Determined to get some clarity, Laura decided it was time to confront her ex-husband. He was the one who had helped bring Maria into their lives, and she knew that it was time to face him. She had avoided him for years, not wanting to relive the hurt of their failed marriage, but this was different. Her children were involved now, and it was time to face the truth. She called him that morning, and after a few rings, he answered. Laura. His voice was as cold and distant as she remembered, but there was a tinge of surprise in it. What's this about? I need to talk to you, Laura said, her voice steady but firm. About Matt and Sophie, about Maria. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before he spoke again. What about them? I don't understand what's happening, Laura said, her voice rising with frustration. You and Maria, you've taken everything from me, and now my kids, my own children, are choosing her over me. They're spending all their time with her, and I can't understand why. Her ex-husband sighed, a sound that sent a sharp pang through Laura's chest. It's not that simple, Laura. Maria has been there for them in ways that you haven't. She's been their rock since the divorce. She's been there when they needed someone. Laura felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. She's been their rock? You mean she's been the one to replace me? The one to step into my role and push me out of their lives? I'm not saying that, he replied, his tone defensive. But you have to understand. After everything that happened between us, after the divorce, they needed stability. Maria gave them that. You can't just expect everything to go back to how it was before. Laura clenched her fists, the anger she had been holding back now bubbling to the surface. So that's it? You're just going to erase me from their lives because Maria is more stable? More what? More worthy? It's not about worth, he said, his voice softening. You need to let them go. They're grown now. They have their own lives to live, their own choices to make. Maria has become a part of that. She's part of their future. Why wasn't I ever enough? Laura asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why did I give everything to them, only for them to turn their backs on me for someone else? What did I do wrong? Her ex-husband didn't respond immediately. When he did speak, it was with an edge of regret, but also finality. I don't know what you want me to say, Laura. They've made their decisions, and now you need to accept that. It's not about you anymore. It's about them, about what they need, about what they've chosen. Laura stood in the middle of her kitchen, feeling the sting of his words in her chest. I gave them everything, she said softly, more to herself than to him. I gave them everything, and now they don't even want me. I know, he said, his voice gentler now. But sometimes people move on. Sometimes they need something different. The conversation ended soon after that, but the damage had already been done. Laura felt like she had been sucker punched, the reality of the situation hitting her in a way it never had before. Her ex-husband had made it clear. This wasn't just a phase. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. Maria had taken her place in their lives, and there was nothing Laura could do to change that. The house felt emptier now, like a vacuum had been created in the space between them. Her children were gone, their love and loyalty slipping through her fingers like sand. She could still hear their laughter in her memory, their smiles and bright eyes that once looked to her for everything. But now, all she saw was the cold void left in their absence. Laura knew it was time to stop pretending. The fairy tale she had imagined for so long, where her children would always be by her side, where they would come to her with open arms, where the family would stand strong together, was gone. It had shattered in an instant, leaving her standing alone, with nothing but the pieces of what used to be. The painful truth was clear now. Her children had moved on. They had found someone else to fill the gap she had once occupied. And no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't undo the damage that had been done. The days that followed Laura's painful conversation with her ex-husband were filled with a strange kind of numbness. The anger she had felt earlier seemed to fade, but in its place, a cold sense of determination began to settle in. She was no longer the same woman who had once believed that love and sacrifice could fix everything. The realization that her children had turned their backs on her, and worse, had chosen Maria over her, had fundamentally changed something inside her. Laura knew she couldn't just sit back and let this happen. She couldn't let them walk away from her and not face the consequences. As the weeks passed, the empty house felt like a cage. It was quiet, too quiet. But inside her, a plan began to take shape, one that was cold, calculated, and full of purpose. Laura wasn't going to chase after them. She wasn't going to beg for their love and attention. She had done that too many times already, and it had never worked. She had given them everything she had, and now it was time to take back control. The $1 million check she had set aside for them once a symbol of love and sacrifice, was now a tool in her larger strategy. It had been intended as a gift, a future for them, something to change their lives for the better. But now, it felt like a weapon. The money, which had been meant for their growth, would now become the key to her own redemption. Laura's mind raced as she thought about how best to use it. She could give it to them. She could let them have the money, let them live their lives and walk away. Or she could make them pay for the emotional abandonment they had caused her. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but Laura knew she had to do it. The idea of sitting idly by, of letting them forget her without facing any consequences, was unbearable. So, she made the decision. She would wait. She would wait for the moment when they came to her, when they needed her, when they realized what they had lost. Because she knew that moment would come. They would need her, just as they always had. And when they did, she would be ready. She would remind them of the price of betrayal. Laura didn't take the money to a bank or to any financial institution. Instead, she kept it in a safe hidden in her bedroom, out of sight, out of reach, and in a place where only she knew its location. Her strategy was simple. She would remain patient, watchful, and silent. She wouldn't call them, wouldn't chase after them. They had made their choice, and now it was time for her to make hers. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Laura watched as the seasons changed outside her window, the world moving on while she remained in the same place, silent, watching, waiting. Her children didn't reach out. Matt continued to spend time with Maria, and Sophie seemed to vanish into the background of her new life. The gap between them widened with every passing day. Then, one morning, the phone rang. It was Matt. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he was calling her. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let her excitement show. She answered the phone with a calmness she hadn't felt before, her voice steady, but her heart racing. "Mom, we need to talk," Matt said, his voice strained. "Things aren't going well. We've had some problems with Maria and now, well, we need your help." Laura could hear the desperation in his voice, the crack of uncertainty. She felt a sharp pang of satisfaction. The moment had finally come. Her children, once so sure of their decision to cast her aside, were now reaching out in their time of need. But Laura wasn't going to give in so easily. She had waited for this moment, and now she would take her time. She wouldn't be their safety net anymore. She wouldn't be the one to rescue them from the consequences of their own actions. "What happened, Matt?" she asked, her voice cool and distant. "What's going on with Maria?" "We had an argument," Matt admitted. "She's left. She's gone, and now everything is falling apart. I don't know what to do, Mom. We need you." The words stung, but Laura didn't let them show. She had already anticipated this moment. She knew they would come to her when they realized that Maria wasn't the answer to everything. Laura's mind raced with the possibilities. She could offer them comfort, offer them help, offer them the $1 million she had saved. But that wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't make them understand the depth of the betrayal they had caused her. She wanted them to understand that their actions had consequences. "I see," she said quietly, her voice cold. "You need me now, don't you? After everything, Now you realize what you lost. After everything I did for you, you think I'm going to just step in and fix things?" There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Matt didn't know how to respond, but Laura could feel his regret and desperation through the line. I'm sorry, Mom. We should have never shut you out. We should have never turned away from you." Laura paused, savoring the moment. It wasn't enough for her yet. "I know," she said softly, "but things aren't so simple anymore. You don't just get to walk back into my life, not after what you did. There's a price for that, Matt, and I'm afraid you're going to have to pay it." The phone call ended soon after that, and Laura sat in silence, staring at the check sitting in her drawer. Her children had come back to her when they needed something, but it wasn't just money they needed. It was her forgiveness, her love, her understanding. And as much as it hurt, Laura knew that if they truly wanted her back, they would have to earn it. She wasn't ready to forgive them yet. They had to learn that betrayal had a price. The days dragged on in a kind of stillness that Laura had come to accept. The phone call from Matt had been a stark reminder of the world she had once been a part of, a world that now felt distant and foreign. Her children, once so central to her life, now seemed like strangers. They had come to her, yes, but it was only because their own lives had fallen apart. Laura had been ready to make them pay for the betrayal, to make them prove that they truly understood the hurt they had caused. But the longer she sat with that decision, the more she realized that the situation wasn't as simple as she had imagined. Her heart, though still bruised, began to soften. She found herself reflecting on the days when her children were small, when they looked up to her with adoration, when they held her hand and sought her approval. She remembered the way Matt and Sophie had laughed together, the way they had been a unit, a family. And now they were lost, separated from her, lost in the chaos of their own choices. The money, which had once been a symbol of her sacrifice, now felt like a burden. She had kept it, hidden away in that safe, as a tool for revenge. But in her heart, she knew that revenge wouldn't heal the wounds. It wouldn't make her children understand the depth of her pain. It wouldn't fix the broken bond between them. She had been so focused on teaching them a lesson that she hadn't realized that she too had lessons to learn. Perhaps it wasn't about them paying for what they'd done, but about finding a way to rebuild what had been broken. One evening, as she sat at the dining table, a knock came at the door. The sound echoed through the house, sharp and sudden, breaking the quiet stillness. Laura stood, her heart racing, unsure of what to expect. She had told herself she wouldn't go running after them, but a small part of her hoped, needed, that this knock would be the moment she had been waiting for. She opened the door, and there stood Matt, his face drawn and weary, his eyes reflecting a mixture of regret and uncertainty. Behind him, Sophie stood a little further back, her arms crossed over her chest, her posture stiff and defensive. Laura's heart twisted, but she held herself steady. She wasn't going to be the one to crumble. "Mom," Matt said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "We need to talk. Can we come in?" Laura stepped aside, allowing them into the house. It had been so long since she had seen them like this, standing in her doorway, unsure of how to bridge the gap between them. The house was the same, but it felt different. The air, once filled with laughter and love, now felt cold and distant. Still, Laura motioned for them to sit, her heart pounding in her chest. "I don't know where to start," Sophie said, breaking the silence. Her voice was softer than it had been during their last conversation, laced with guilt. "We've made so many mistakes, Mom. We didn't realize what we were doing, and we didn't see how much it was hurting you." Laura remained silent, watching her children carefully. They hadn't come with excuses or apologies that felt rehearsed. This was different. This was raw. And as painful as it was, part of her wanted to believe them. She wanted to believe that they could find their way back to her. But the wounds they had left were still fresh, and trust was something that would take time to rebuild. "Why did it take so long for you to realize?" Laura asked, her voice soft but firm. She wasn't angry, not anymore. The anger had faded, replaced by something that felt more like resignation. "Why did you wait until things fell apart to come to me?" Matt looked down at his hands, as if searching for the right words. "We thought we had it all figured out," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "We thought we didn't need you, that we could do it on our own. But we were wrong. We lost sight of what really mattered, and now we don't know how to fix it." Sophie nodded in agreement, her eyes meeting Laura's with a vulnerability that was almost heartbreaking. "We took you for granted." "Mom?" she admitted. "And I'm sorry. We should have never pushed you away. You've always been there for us, and we didn't appreciate it." Laura's heart clenched, but she remained calm, her voice steady as she spoke. "It's not just about pushing me away, Sophie. It's about you choosing someone else. Someone who didn't have the history with you that I do. Maria might have been there for you, but I was the one who carried you. I was the one who made sacrifices. I was the one who held your hand through everything." The room fell silent, the weight of Laura's words hanging in the air. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the years of sacrifice. It was the emotional toll of feeling, invisible to the people she had loved most. And now, as they sat there in front of her, Laura felt the sting of all those lost years, all those missed opportunities. But she also felt something else, a glimmer of hope, small but undeniable. "I don't know if I can forgive you right away," Laura said quietly. "But I want to try. I want us to find a way back to each other." Matt and Sophie looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. "We'll do whatever it takes, Mom," Matt said. "We'll work for it." And in that moment, something inside Laura shifted. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but the door to reconciliation was slowly creaking open. She didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in months, she felt a sense of possibility. They had a long way to go, but the first step had been taken, and that, at least, was a start. The $1 million check was still in the safe, still a symbol of everything Laura had worked for. But now it wasn't a weapon or a tool for revenge. It was just money, and the love that had once seemed beyond repair was, perhaps, still worth saving.